Hello, everyone, and welcome. Ivy Perez here. I am continuing with the book club mastermind, and the book is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Now, this is week 2 for me with this book, and I'm working through part 2 and part 3. So, part 2 is living into our values, and part 3 is braving trust. So, I'm just going to go over a couple of things here and give you questions for you to ponder, to think about. I think these two parts about trust and values are incredibly important. Some people believe that when you ask them a question with regard to what are your values, they think that personal values and professional values are different, and they're not. So if you value honesty and integrity and work ethic, that is both personal and professional. There is no difference. Your values are who you are as a person. It's kind of like the fiber, the core fiber of your being. So, with part 2, living into our values, here's a question I want you to think about. So, do our personal values match those in our team, in our company? Now, think about that for a moment. For me personally, sometimes initially with a team, as you're getting to know each other, maybe not initially, but that's where communication comes into play. That's where it's really important to sit down with your people and find out what are their values and express and communicate what are your values personally, and what you want as the umbrella values of the company, because that's really important. More than likely, it'll be congruent in alignment with your values and the values of the company. And when you speak to people and you understand where their values are, that's where you can either kind of have that communication as to getting everybody on board. And also, some people don't know what their values are. They may think they do, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. And this is really important. And for those that don't know what their values are, this is an opportunity for you as a team leader, as a boss, as uh, a colleague, to kind of help people dig deep and find out what matters to them, because what matters to them should matter to you. And when everyone is on the same page, granted, it's not going to be like 100% on the same page all the time, but when you all can come into agreement, in alignment with values, then you have a different kind of communication with each other that builds trust. Okay. So the other question to that one, a two-part, is if you don't. So if you don't have your values that match your team or your company, then how can you make them align better? So I talked about that with regard to communication. So the next question I want to ask you is to think of a recent time where you made a choice that um, matched or didn't match your values, and how did it affect your outcome? So that's just something for you, as this is a recorded message, a video, just something to think about. What recently did I do that I chose to do that was in alignment with my values, and what was the outcome there? Or something that you decided you chose to do that wasn't in alignment, and what was the outcome there? So sometimes there's a physical outcome, sometimes there are ramifications, sometimes positive and sometimes negative. There are consequences with the choices that we choose. So think about that for yourself. Now, what do you think are difficulties that people face when trying to stay true to their values at work? So think about that. What difficulties do people face when trying to stay true to their values? Maybe it's something where you observed in your work environment where someone was really um, really was very strong about their values and what was going on in the company. Maybe something, there was a little rift in the company, and they stood their ground because they believed that something wasn't congruent or in alignment, not just with their values, but in just in general. Maybe it's coming into the organization because the mission, the values aligned with theirs, and then there's something that's happening that's kind of like, it's not congruent, or there's a misunderstanding, or just it's just not in alignment anymore. So can you think of a time? So, for the most part, with part two and living into our values, those are a few questions I had with regard to my mastermind. And it really causes some really great um, dialogue back and forth, the masterminding. And it's really important. Values is so incredibly important to know what yours are. And if you don't, in this book, I believe it's page, hold on, did I write it in? Oh, sorry about that. Yes. Page 188. She gives a list of values. So I'll give you a handful here. We'll go through the alphabet. So there's accountability. Sorry for the glare. Accountability, authenticity, being the best, belonging, collaboration, commitment, community, competence. Let's see here. Diversity, environment, efficiency, equality, ethics, fairness, forgiveness, freedom, grace, gratitude, honesty, humility, integrity, initiative, kindness, leadership, learning, openness, patience, perseverance, reliability, resourcefulness. That's a big one too, because we have a lot of resources at our fingertips. So in this day and age, there's absolutely zero excuse to say you don't know what to do. You can go online, you can Google and just throw in a question, and that will start you on the path to just arming yourself with knowledge, opening your eyes to new information and insights, and also asking questions. Safety, security, teamwork, tradition, trust, truth, understanding, vision, vulnerability, well-being, wisdom. So those are a handful, and I'm sure if you look at that list, there might be a few that you can add to it. So that's really important. So moving on to part three, as this is not all encompassing, this video, but part three was about braving trust. Great one. Braving trust. So my question to you is, what makes trust strong in a team or a company, and how can we make sure we have it? So on page 223, she talks about the trust talk. I love this. Page 223. She says here, get specific rather than rumbling generally about trustworthiness and using the word trust. We need to pinpoint or point to specific behaviors. We need to be able to identify exactly where the breach lies and then speak to it. Again, communication. Communication is key. It's not always easy, but if you foster an environment where you openly communicate, share your thoughts, your insights, be a little vulnerable, because that adds to trust. Because in a work environment or a team environment, getting to know each other. People come from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, religious, cultural. So in one culture, maybe a person is taught that, the authority figure, whatever they say is whatever they say, and you don't have the right to question. Whereas someone else might have been brought up with you question everything. There's nothing wrong with questioning. When you ask a question, it's the only way you're going to know, and things like that. So it's just understanding, it's communicating, it's asking, it's knowing their values, what's important to them, and just taking time every day, just a little bit at a time to get to know your people. That builds trust. So she also talks about, let's see here, the braving inventory. I absolutely love this. So let's see here. She says here the braving, that's an acronym, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. The braving inventory is first and foremost a rumble tool, a conversation guide to use with colleagues that walk with us through the conversation from a place of curiosity, learning, and ultimately trust building. So the acronym, braving, boundaries. You respect my boundaries, and when you're not clear about what's okay and not okay, you ask. You're willing to say no. So with regard to this acronym, she says that some are straightforward and some are they require unpacking. So R, reliability. You do what you say you do. At work, this means staying aware of your competencies and limitations so you don't overpromise and are able to deliver on commitments and balance uh, competing priorities. So that's important. A, accountability. Your own mistakes, apologize and make amends. Okay? This is where you build trust. We're all human, and if you can have that way of communicating with your people and just letting them know, hey, I'm just like you. I just may have, a bit more knowledge, a bit more experience. Um, no one's better than anyone else. Some people are bigger thinkers, some people are more action takers, but that doesn't mean that anyone is better. So if you can speak to your people, if you're in a leadership position, in a way that says, hey, we're here together to work together. I'm just like you. I have a family, or, this is happening in my life. Like, not in a way that's kind of lets people know, like, oh God, just more like, hey, I'm just like you. I have a family, I have kids, I struggle. Once I leave here, I have to drive my daughter or my son to, basketball practice and this. My mom is sick. I have to go to the hospital at night. And then I still have to come home and make sure the kids are prepared for school and then work on our project so that I come prepared for you, kind of thing. So there's life. Express that. So boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault. Here, you don't share information or experiences that are not yours to share. This is huge. So she mentions here a story about someone not receiving a promotion because of confidentiality issues. And the person said, well, I would never and have never shared anything that you shared with me outside of the company, the office, which it was true. However, the individual, the boss or manager noticed was that that person shared information that they shouldn't have shared. So that's a trust issue. You may not share my information, but you're sharing someone else's information. So who's not to say that in time you won't share information that's confidential and sacred? Sometimes people share things that are very sacred to them. And if you share that with others, it shatters the trust. Integrity. Choose courage over comfort and non-judgment. She says here, I can ask for what I need and you can ask for what you need. We can talk about how we feel without judgment. That's huge. That's That's so incredibly huge because many of us, I know for me personally, I grew up with a lot of judgment, observing people judging others. So I'm not the type of person to judge others. However, I'm very judgmental against myself. It's just something that, I internalize. So, and I work on that, right? I'm human, just like you, right? And then lastly, generosity. G, you extend the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions, words, and actions of others. So I absolutely love this. She talks about unpacking the vault. This is where she talks about the story about someone sharing the confidentiality of someone else. So going to my notes here, I'll go through this quickly. Um, Okay, this is something for you to ponder. Can you think of a time when you felt vulnerable at work? What was the scenario? What was the situation? How did you handle it? Can you think of what she talks about in the book, and was that even something that was brought up? Is it something that you can think of um, with this question for yourself and say, okay, with this, how can I handle it better? How can I step forward and be more forthright in vulnerability and in trust and in the braving inventory to help others, even help your superior, depending on, the depending if you're able to, because we all know sometimes our superiors, you're unable to speak with them because you're um, not on their level. Let's just say that. So, and lastly, how does fear of being vulnerable hurt trust? That's a big one. And how can we make it easier for people to open up? Uh, so on page 228, she talks about unpacking non-judgment. And okay, 228. So let's see here. So you can go through that. And then page 231, I love this statement where she says, trust is earned in small moments. So these are little things. It could be something as just asking questions of people in your office and your team, like, how are you? How was your weekend? How are your kids? And if I remember correctly, you said that your son wasn't feeling well. Is everything okay? Just little things like that. And it might be uncomfortable for you at first because it's not something you do, but over time, if you are deliberate in being consciously intentional about connecting with your people in your office, on your team, then you'll open up, you'll feel better, they will open up, and then you start to build trust. It's huge. Love that. Trust is earned in small moments. And then I'll leave you with this. And I'll actually read it to you on page 232 to 233. So let me see, I don't want this to cover. Okay. So Melinda Gates, I believe it was Brene Brown talked about the marble jar. So, uh, so here Brene Brown says, I love what Melinda Gates shares about the marble jar and the braving process. So here we go. After you taught me your metaphor about marbles in a jar, I adopted it as my entire framework for thinking about trust. Every small gesture I make in support of a colleague puts one marble in the jar. But anytime I undercut a colleague, anytime I betray trust, a huge handful of marbles goes out of the jar. Thinking in this way makes me more aware of the seemingly small things that lead to building trust and also the small things that might break trust. The 7 elements of braving have helped me think more clearly about what those small things are. For example, I focus on integrity, on matching actions to words. The foundation is a values-driven organization. If I am behaving in ways that are consistent with what we say we're all about, if I treat people equally, if I welcome open dialogue, then I am putting marbles in the jar. But if I act counter to those values, if I resist innovative approaches because I'm worried about the risk, for example, I take a lot of marbles out. I also concentrate on accountability. As the leader of the organization, there aren't as many structures to hold me accountable. I don't have regular meetings with my boss. So I have to be very careful about being my own boss, about asking myself how I'm doing and owning up to what I'm doing wrong. So again, the intention behind the braving inventory is a tool for creating the time, space, and intention to talk about trust in a way that's productive and actionable. It's a rumble tool, a guide, a touchstone. So I hope that was helpful. That's parts 2 and 3. And stay tuned for next week when I talk about part 4 in Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Phenomenal book. Bye for now.